Thank you to the Health Professionals Australia Reform Association for your invitation to speak today. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person. I'm grateful and slightly flattered that you'd rather play a pre-recorded message from me rather than to have someone else open your second annual conference live. I'm told that you wish to hear about the two recent Senate inquiries that have involved your profession. The first is the medical complaints process in Australia inquiry that delivered its report last November, an inquiry that I instigated, and the second is the inquiry that sprang from that, which is currently in progress, into the complaints mechanism itself administered under the Health Practitioner Regulation National Law. I'll get to those in a moment. But first, let's talk about you and why you're gathered here today. Your organisation's website says that you are here to discuss a crisis in the culture of healthcare. Among your concerns are bullying, anti-competitive behaviour, and the pressing need for authentic healthcare regulation reform in Australia. Between 2003 and 2005, similar concerns prompted a nurse at the Bundaberg Base Hospital to raise the performance of a surgeon with whom she worked. Her name was Tony Hoffman. His was Dr. Jayant Patel. Queensland Health appointed Dr. Patel despite his having had no surgical specialist qualifications. According to one published account, Dr. Patel is linked to at least 87 deaths among the 1,200 patients he treated. 30 patients died while under his care. Nurse Hoffman repeatedly tried to blow the whistle on Dr. Patel from within. Hospital management ignored her, belittled her, and humiliated her. Undeterred, she approached her local members of parliament to get, finally, some results. Only then was she listened to, only then was action taken. Only later was she vindicated. Tony Hoffman later received the Order of Australia for her marvellous and heroic efforts to shine a light in a very dark place. Later still, she eventually received compensation from Queensland Health in a private settlement for being treated, in her own words, like a leper. Clearly in this case, Dr. Patel was alone not the major problem. It was also the system that employed him, the system that had failed to adequately screen him, the system that protected him, and the system that flew him out of the country when the story hit the fan. In 2009, the Health Practitioner Regulation National Law Act was passed to create a national framework to deal with accreditation and complaints. The national law was in part a response to the Patel case. When the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, AHPRA, came into effect in July 2010, it was supposed to make the system of medical administration more transparent. It was supposed to improve things. It was also supposed to make complaints against the likes of Dr. Patel easier. However, within 3 years, evidence emerged that the national law had failed to address some serious issues within the health professions. Things weren't getting better. Indeed, this evidence supported anecdotal accounts that the national law and its implementation may have made things actually worse. The evidence came from Beyond Blue, which published a national mental health survey of doctors and medical students. And the results were pretty shocking. That report found bullying to be a significant source of stress within the medical profession, especially in hospital situations, with levels well above the national average. The word among health practitioners was that the new system was adding to their stress because it was itself being used as a form of bullying. The process itself had become the punishment. In 2015, almost 5 years after the national law took effect, Sydney vascular surgeon Gabrielle McMullen provided further evidence that the system was not addressing the bullying and harassment problem. At the launch of a book on gender equality, Dr. McMullen said that for female trainee surgeons, it's easier to give in to sexual harassment than to pursue the predators because of entrenched sexism amongst many male surgeons. The Royal Australian College of Surgeons immediately established an expert advisory group to look into the issue. When the results came back 6 months later, it found that nearly half of all surgeons across all specialties had experienced discrimination, bullying, or sexual harassment. Nearly half. These results surprised even Dr. McMullen. Early last year, when the Senate began its inquiry that I instigated into the medical complaints process in Australia, the overarching issue was, quote, the prevalence of bullying and harassment within Australia's medical profession. Among the terms of reference was how the national law was operating, particularly with regard to the complaints handling process. In all, 126 submissions were received, with most being confidential, for obvious reasons. Several, including from your organisation and its members, outlined serious concerns with the way that APRA and regulatory bodies such as the Royal Australian College of Surgeons were implementing the spirit of the national law. After one of the inquiry's hearings, I was quoted in the Sydney Morning Herald as saying the evidence was depressing, and it sure was. It wasn't just the evidence I'd heard that day about the real-world situation for medical students, 1 in 5 of whom have considered self-harm, a pretty shocking statistic. The most depressing thing was that 18 months after Dr. McMullen blew the whistle in relation to her colleagues, the umpires within the system, the Royal Australian College of Surgeons, had effectively called play on. While the focus of the terms of the reference for that inquiry was on the medical complaints process, the committee was concerned by evidence that clearly shows that bullying and harassment remain prevalent across the medical profession, affecting patients and their families, medical practitioners, students and trainees. The committee was particularly concerned by the number of individual submissions it had received from medical practitioners, nurses and patients sharing their experience with the complaints process. Among the inquiry's 6 recommendations were that a new inquiry be established whose terms of reference examine the implementation of the current complaint system under the national law. That inquiry is currently examining a number of things, including the role of APRA and the national boards, and whether the existing regulatory framework established by the national law contains adequate provisions for addressing medical complaints. It's also looking at the roles of APRA, the national boards and professional organisations such as the various colleges in addressing concerns within the medical profession with the complaints process. In all, the inquiry received 122 submissions, with just over half being confidential. The inquiry will produce its report in just a few weeks' time, in about 5 weeks. Whilst I can't preempt the outcome of the inquiry, what I can tell you is this. Australians and Australian medical professions undoubtedly owe whistleblowers like Tony Hoffman and Gabrielle McMullen a huge vote of thanks. They had the courage to stand up to systems that had become autocratic, bureaucratic, self-serving, or possibly even corrupted. But they had to stand alone. It follows then that ordinary, decent, fair-minded Australians also owe your organisation and you as individuals a huge vote of thanks, even if they all don't know yet who you are. The establishment of your organisation 2 years ago now means that dedicated health professionals do not need to live and operate in isolation and in fear. You can now band together to beat the bullies. By doing what you have done, and through what you are going to do today, you're also piercing the seal within that power vacuum. The stench of past dealings, depressing as it is, now at least is being aired in public, and that can only be a good thing. There is strength in unity, and as your organisation grows, I wish you all the very best in providing a strong and united voice on how to achieve important reforms in the health professions, in the healthcare industry. To paraphrase that famous saying on your website, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is that good men and women do nothing. So, to the good men and good women there, have a good morning, a good conference, and from me and my team, good on you. Thank you.